Superman, how can I ever thank you?
Don't try now. You'll be seeing me again. Up, up, and away!
All I ask is that you tell the truth about me.
And that is?
I'm not here to scare anyone.
Is to keep testing your limits.
That is where you've always been wrong about me, Lex. I'm as human as anyone. I love, I get scared. I wake up every morning and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other and I try to make the best choices I can.
You just saw how Superman has evolved over the years, but long before the Man of Steel became a global icon gracing comic book covers, movie screens, and merchandise, he was just an idea in the mind of a teenager during the Great Depression. Jerry Siegel created Superman. His friend Joe Shuster brought the character to life through illustrations. In the book, The Superman Wars, A Battle for Truth, Justice, and an American Icon, author William Bernhardt tells the story of how Jerry helped create the first true comic book superhero, only to later lose control of that character. It's a decades-long battle over credit, creator rights, and one of the most recognizable characters in pop culture history. William joins us to share why this story is so needed and needed to be told. Good morning.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. I love this story. You know, it's the irony of the whole thing is it's a story of good versus evil as well. And before we get into more of that story, I want to get into your story. You're a kid from small town Oklahoma, always loved reading and knew you wanted to be a writer at an early age.
Well, that's one of the reasons I can relate to Jerry Siegel's story so much, because he was exactly the same. I don't know why, but my mother says was telling people I wanted to be a writer when I was 7, and she's my mom, and she'll probably watch this, so we have to go with that.
Yeah, you have to go with that. But when I said small town Oklahoma, you know, there were just so many things that weren't distractions that I would imagine reading was a great escape.
It was for me. I was very fortunate that in my small town, at a time when people still walked to school, you know, the public library, a small one, but it was very close. I could go every day if I wanted to, and the librarians there were so attentive and paid so much, you know, attention to this geeky little kid with the thick glasses who kept coming in every day and showed me around, introduced me to different things, and it just sparked a lifelong habit of reading.
I can relate to that, and I had a nostalgic moment when I was going through your notes yesterday, and you said you sent to Highlights magazine your poem. Yes. I remember I looked so forward to that Highlights magazine. I mean, from cover to the cover, I loved that magazine. Right. And you sent off a poem, and you got your first rejection letter.
Yeah, and I can prove it. I've got the receipts. I saved it. It's still back, and you know, hundreds probably after that. But that's the way writing goes. Few people get published the first time out. You write and you write, and eventually you get better, and eventually you publish. But you got to be in it for the long game.
Yeah. We talk a lot today about how everybody gets a trophy. It's like, dude, does everybody really need to get a trophy, or do you need to earn a trophy? What did that teach you early on, getting that first rejection letter?
Well, at the time I was 11, so I'm not sure I fully comprehended just how hard getting published would really be. But over time I did. I kept sending things out and kept sending things out. And then finally, you know, my first book was published in '91. This new book is my 67th published book.
Wow.
But the first one published in, that seems like, overnight success because it was a big hit. But if you realize I got my first rejection letter at 11, it's not overnight anymore. It took 20 years.
You had an early start, but sold over 10 million books, a national bestsellers list many times. And some of your works include, we're looking at them on the screen, Ben Kincaid novels, the Daniel Pike series, Splitsville legal thriller series, Red Sneaker books. You go on and on and on. Your new book, The Superman Wars, the story of Jerry Siegel. Yes. How did you come across this?
Well, I was writing another book, a novel. It's called Justice for All, that dealt with creator rights, and I started reading and looking into it more. I knew a little bit about the Siegel and Shuster story, but I had no idea how much was involved, and I especially didn't understand why, when I looked at it, I mean, this litigation over Superman and the ownership of the character went on for 70 years.
That's crazy.
And as a former trial attorney, I thought, what takes 70 years? I've had long trials, but they didn't go that long. And so I started looking into it and, learned much about it, why it took so long. And although it was in some ways tragic for Jerry Siegel, it became the most important and influential creator rights battle of modern history.
Yeah, and it's crazy because he created the new genre, really, and Superman, that first big superhero, and it gave credibility to a new industry publishing comic books and of course modern day TV and movies as well. How did he end up losing control? How did that happen?
Well, Jerry was very enthusiastic, but also very naive. I mean, when he came up with the idea for Superman, he was an 11th grader, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
His father had died early. Joe's father had no business experience. They had no mentors. They had no agent. They had no lawyer. I wish I'd been around to represent him. It might have changed the whole history of comic books.
But you know what? It was such a different time as well, because this, as you mentioned, this actually became one of the precedent cases that changed some things. But it was also a different time.
Yeah, well, it was the Depression. And I think that's one of the reasons that Superman took off like he did. When a quarter of the nation is unemployed and crime is on the rise and the mob influence and looming war in Europe, this is when people were looking for a symbol of hope. And that's what Superman became. In the very first story, Jerry calls him the champion of the weak and oppressed. And in those early stories, Superman doesn't deal with supervillains and aliens and stuff. He deals with the problems of the time. He's like a FDR New Deal reformer, dealing with our problems.
Yeah, and no one was publishing what he was writing, so they founded their own magazine, Science Fiction, the Advanced Guard of Future Civilization.
That was a fanzine that Jerry had created way back when he was, 12 or 13. But it turns out to be the first of what will become many fanzines as this fan movement, comic collectors, people who take it seriously, rose up later.
Yeah, the third issue featured the reign of the Superman. Now, the interesting thing is Superman, originally, he was like, he's going to be a villain, the bad guy.
Right.
But then he switched, and that changed everything.
Yeah, Jerry took the character through at least 4 distinct iterations. That's all in the book. He starts as that bald villain who looks very menacing, looks like a future Lex Luthor. And then there's the no powers version, there's the time traveler version, but eventually he hits upon the guy who came from another planet, which, is basically the Moses story set in outer space. There's trouble at home. His parents put him in a basket, send him a long way, where he's adopted and raised and becomes a hero to a whole different group of people.
Yeah, and let my people go. All right, 1938, Superman made his debut in the Action Comics issue #1, published by National Allied Publication, now DC Comics, as many people know. So obstacles along the way, as you mentioned, he didn't have an agent or a lawyer. And by the way, this is something that happens to people every day, right? Even today.
Yes.
We hear a lot of those stories.
That's the whole point of this book to me, because it's a cautionary tale, because these things still happen today. I host a series of a writers' conference and retreats called WriterCon, and every year I get people who come in and they've paid $15,000 to a vanity press who did nothing for them.
Yeah.
Or they've signed something without getting a lawyer to look at it. And now people are dealing with AI scams that hit their inbox every morning, and people ask, is this for real? Is this legit?
Right.
And they don't know. And writers need to talk to each other.
And in their case, they were also intimidated. They were told, look, we're taking this whether you like it or not. And then Harry Donenfeld bragged about his mob ties, for example.
Right. Donenfeld was the man who seized control of the comic book company at just before Superman is published. He knew nothing about comic books. He had, like you say, mob ties. He'd been a rum runner during Prohibition. He'd been indicted twice for pornography and barely escaped by the skin of his teeth. His main interest in this company was that it would allow him to publish something that wouldn't get him thrown in prison. He had no idea that less than a year later he'd be a millionaire because of Superman. But Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were not.
Yeah, and of course, millionaires since. Okay, how does it all finally unfold? And by the way, you talked to members of Jerry's family who had been reluctant to talk in the past, his kids, Laura, Michael, and James.
Yeah, that was a real treat because, like you say, they haven't given a lot of interviews, but they were willing to talk to me, and I just got a treasure trove of information. They have the Jerry Siegel archive. They knew so much about it. Going back to before Laura was even born. That first lawsuit was in 1947. Jerry came back. He'd been serving his country during World War II, came back and found out the company had not only completely taken over Superman, they'd run another one of his scripts and characters without even buying it. They had no legal right. They were just running and making a fortune off that he wasn't getting any of. So he finally sues to try and get Superman back. Yeah. It does not go well. He not only does not get Superman back, he gets fired by the company, fired from his own character, and worse, they erase Jerry and Joe's creator credits from the feature. Before it always appeared, created by Siegel and Shuster. Not anymore. They were erased.
Insult to injury. All right, folks, if you have an idea, you need to contact William. But anyway, before you launch that idea. But William, thank you so much for sharing this story with us. Because there's a lot more to just their story. It really speaks to a lot of people who feel like they may have been wronged in life, and just understanding not to give up the fight. And when you know the truth is the truth.
Absolutely right. Don't sign anything without talking to someone first.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Don't let what happened to Jerry happen to you.
That's right. Thank you very much, William.
Thank you.
You can buy your own copy of The Superman Wars on Amazon or any online bookseller, or visit your local bookstores. Such an interesting book.